maybe they just keep dating narcissists. And it may well be that one of their missions or their soul in this life is to learn to value themselves and their self-worth. And these narcissists are the mechanism to make them go.
Hello and welcome to Holistic Circle podcast, Spiritual Conversation. My name is Philipp Kobald. We are reaching out to people who are passionate about spreading light, love, and joy. And I have here today from Kent, Tracy Fance. Welcome, Tracy.
Hi there. Thanks for having me on.
All right. This is the second podcast of the year, so I'm a bit rusty, but I'm getting there.
Well done. It always takes a little while after Christmas to get back in the swing of things, doesn't it?
Oh, yes, it does. Yes, it does, especially this year. All right. So thank you so very much for joining us. We have a lot of things to talk to as we agreed in our meet and greet, but you really just tell us, maybe let's start a little bit with a small introduction, what you do, some small background, couple of minutes so people understand, and then I will make my point why I'm so specifically looking forward having you on the show.
Okay. So I'm a psychic, a medium, and tarot reader. And I work very heavily within the Akashic Records, which is a spiritual dimension. Think of it as your personnel file. And I help people understand the problems in their lives from a completely different perspective. So rather than looking to what's going on in our lives, I'm looking at what's going on in the soul and our past lives, creating the issues in our lives now. And that can be
Right.
all things: health, wealth, happiness, love, life purpose, career. It can be absolutely anything, but it's a good place to start delving in.
Right. Before, I must make a stupid joke. It's very mandatory in my podcast. Please, is it possible if I pay you extra if you erase my personal file from the past?
But then you wouldn't be who you are now.
We have a deal. Just name the price.
Then,
Especially my years on academy as a student, those couple of years, raise them right now. Do it quick.
see, I really believe that we are who we are because of what our soul has been through in this life and other lives. So I don't want to change anything, even if I didn't enjoy it, because it makes me who I am. So I'm totally the opposite of you.
No, that's what I'm afraid of. Okay, let's get serious. The reason I'm so much looking forward, because just can you give us an idea, how many years have you been doing this as a main income business?
Okay, about 15 years.
There you go. This is something which one of the many reasons I'm so looking forward of this conversation, to have someone here with me who I think they would call it seasoned. Is that an appropriate term?
Yeah,
To have someone who made a life, made a real career out of this. And I think this is will be very inspiring for a lot of people who are listening to this podcast, who might, thinking of changing lives or changing their careers. A lot of people are unhappy with what they do, and spiritual work doesn't matter if it's yoga or being psychic as you or whatever. A lot of people have this great fear of making the transition. So
yeah.
I'm so happy to have someone here with me today who did it 15 years as a main income business. And that's, I think, very inspiring to a lot of people. Maybe you want to say a couple of words on that subject if you feel like.
Well, the first thing I would say is that, like anyone else who's got a nice job with a nice steady income and they've got the bills paid, it is really scary to even contemplate going self employed. Full stop. It doesn't matter whether that's a spiritual business or not. So, and I was there as well. I totally had that. But for me, we had a big recession in the UK back in 2009, and they just pulled the rug from out of me, and away went the business that I had, and I didn't have any choice. Since then, I've also reinvented the business a couple of times. So I've had both sides of the coin. I've had the comfy comfort zone and out of the comfort zone. But the thing is when we're passionate about something, that comes across to people. So if you're in a job that you don't like and is making you miserable, the people that you engage with are going to pick up on that energy. And that actually makes you hate your job even more because there's just no love for it, no passion for it. And doing a job that I hate just because it pays the bills, I just can't do that. That's just not me. So I'm a big believer that you can find what I call a halfway house. So let's say you've got a spiritual business. Maybe you want to do readings like me, or you want to start a yoga business. You can start that on the side and have that as a part-time thing. And so, you don't have to go in and go, hey, it's Monday. Here's my resignation. I don't want to do this anymore. So find a way to do it that works for you and doesn't make life harder because when you're stressed, it is so hard to do the spiritual work and to be intuitive and to be creative, to do it that suits you and your lifestyle and your commitments and where you're at emotionally.
A lot of wise words here already from the start. It's also interesting because I've never would realize how crucial, as you said, you hit the roadblock. And in every conversation I had since I started this podcast, never mind if it's therapist, trauma therapist, whoever it is, always somewhere in this conversation, roadblocks appear and then how people change hitting the roadblock. And if I talk to medical professionals about, people having heart attacks or this or that, that's the moment we transition, we change. It seems to be such an embedded structure in us humans that we need to hit a wall to then say, okay, there's not going further. I have to try a different path. So is this something that you can say a word or two on roadblocks and how this affects people's life?
Okay. So we're here to grow. Our soul didn't come here to have a holiday. It came here to learn and to grow and be stretched. And life on earth is flipping hard, let's be honest. If you've got a nice, easy one where you sailed through it and it's been a dream, then brilliant. But for most people, they've come here and there will be obstacles, but those obstacles are part of the growth. For me, when I've had those times when things have been really challenging, that's actually when I've had to be at my most creative. And, it's very easy to just sit and go, oh, something awful's happening. Oh, I don't know how to deal with this. And then want to go and pull the duvet over your head. But that's not going to resolve it. It'll still be there when you get up. So sometimes we have to use those obstacles to get us out of our comfort zone, to make us do things that we perhaps wouldn't have done before. And I'm sure you've found that over the years. There's been situations where you're in where when you're left with no choice, you pick the path that you wouldn't have done if you weren't under that pressure or you didn't have stress going on. Does that make sense?
I think I'm a rare case of born with a lucky start. So don't don't count me in. But this is a very different conversation. But I get what you mean, and I've worked as a therapist, so yeah, I understand what you're talking about. The reason why I asked you about this roadblocks, I had a reason, and the reason comes here because we all understand real world roadblocks like an economic crisis, heart attack or cancer diagnosis or whatever. We all understand this. Now I would like to know: is there something like a spiritual roadblock?
Oh, totally. I'll tell you a bit. So a classic one, and I went through this myself 15 years ago, is charging for what we do. And I didn't have a problem charging for what I did. The problem I had was all these other people, especially the internet trolls, going, "Oh, this is a gift. You shouldn't pay. You shouldn't charge for this." I'm like, "Well, back in the olden days, you went to the little old lady in the woods and you got a love potion or had a reading, and you gave her a loaf of bread, and everyone was happy." Well, I can't ring up my mortgage guy and go, "Hey, I can't pay the mortgage this month. Do you mind if I give you a reading instead?" I mean, they're just gonna laugh at me, it's just not gonna happen. So I had to overcome all this criticism from people going, "Oh, what you have is a gift. You shouldn't be charging for it." And really what it was they just wanted it for free. Whereas I've been in situations where I've seen how people have treated stuff they've had for free and they haven't valued it. I went to an event and a friend of mine, she took pity on a lady who said she didn't have much money and gave her a free reading. spent 45 minutes with the lady, and then the lady get up, she wanders off, sits down with someone else and takes out the money and pays them. So what she was really saying was, I don't really want to pay for what you're offering. It's not of value to me. And so everything is the same. You know, some people wouldn't pay £100,000 for a car. Some people will. And so it's about value. And it took me a little while to understand that money is energy. Everything is energy. And there has to be an exchange of energy. And so that learning curve was hard, but I come across a lot of people that are struggling with charging in the first place for what they perceive as a gift, for charging their worth. But again, if I go to an event and I've seen it happen, there'll be a reader charging, say, £5 a reading because they're just learning and getting going. And a lot of people would avoid them because they're like, oh, they can't be any good. They're only charging £5. So then they'll go to someone charging £30 and paid for it because to them that comes across as quality. Okay. So with anything we do, if people perceive it to be too cheap, like maybe you're selling jewelry, people might think, oh, well, it's probably rubbish jewelry because that's really cheap. So you've got to value yourself, you've got to value your time, and you have to value what you do because what else could we be doing with our time? You could be spending it with your family. I could be spending it with my family, and we can't get time back. So that's a massive spiritual block for a lot of people because a lot of spiritual people have had many lives where it's been very different or they couldn't charge for it. And they brought those blocks through into this life.
There's a whole world of wisdom in those words.
Oh, well, it's
And
been an interesting learning curve.
I'm not going there or I'll start to cry.
Oh, bless.
And we don't want to have a grown man cry on the podcast.
Yeah, I'd rather not be accused of making grown men cry.
This was great reflection. But now I ask the question one more time because would like to take it now to use your knowledge and use exactly what you every day offer to your clients. I was also wondering if in the people's lives, as we spoke about roadblocks, like hitting the road, like we said, it's cancer and things like that. If there is something like a spiritual roadblock in terms in people's life, unconsciously, you talk about the past, you talk about the files that you can access. So I was wonder if there is something like people not aware of, that there's a spiritual dimension to their being, conscious, subconscious, or out of themselves, guiding them, being involved with them, that can create a spiritual roadblock
Yes.
that you are not feel as a conscious being right now. You don't you can put the if I have cancer and I know if I completely smashed, I can come to you and say, I got this diagnosis from the doctor, this and that, and now I'm devastated. I have to change my life, my diet, whatever. I have to live better, meditate, and so on. So I'm really wondering if there is a layer above us that can create a sort of spiritual clash or a
Yep.
spiritual conflict from whatever past or with others or whatever it is that has an effect on us. Did you come across something like that?
Yeah, totally. So for instance, since you used health there as an issue, if someone has a health issue, it's a mechanism for them to achieve something or change something. Okay. So I'm going to quote Anita Murjani since she's like in the spiritual world. I think it's about 15, 20 years ago. She was stage 4 cancer and she was in a coma. And she realized on a soul level that she wasn't living in an aligned way to who she really was. She was trying to please parents who were mixed religion and mixed race, living in a country that none of them originally came from. And she wasn't respecting her own boundaries and living her life in the way that her soul needed to live it. So she had this realization and then she had an out of body experience. She came back into her body, woke up and went home and made all these changes and the cancer went away. Okay. So She's still here 20 years later, and none of the doctors can understand it because they all agreed that she was at death's door. Okay. And if you read her book, Dying to Be Me by Anita Murjani, you'll find the deeper things in there. So for her, that cancer was her body saying, your life is killing you. You're not happy. You have to make change. Now, that's an extreme case, but I get people who come to me and they might have fibromyalgia. Now, the fibromyalgia is indicative of the fact that they don't particularly have strong boundaries or they don't respect their boundaries, and neither does anybody else. Okay. So the fibromyalgia will make them have boundaries because they might be invited to go to a family function and they know if they go, they're going to be in bed for 3 days afterwards. And in all likelihood, they don't even want to go anyway. But the old them would have gone, oh, well, I have to go. I don't want to upset anyone. I'll go to the family function. Whereas now they've got an excuse and the fibromyalgia, they'll just go, no, I can't do it. When they learn to put those boundaries in place, the fibromyalgia can actually go because they are in charge of their boundaries. Okay. So when our soul comes to this planet, it is preloaded with things from previous lives. So let's say you was a witch in a previous life and you got burnt at the stake, and there was a lot of that going around. Those people quite often struggle with their spirituality in this life because it didn't end well before. So it's like, oh no, I don't want to do that. Or even though it's a different world. Okay. So the things that are influencing us from previous lives are still in the soul and they can cause problems, but not always. Then you've got the things that we've chosen in this life. Like I chose independence. And my mum says that I was born going on age 16 and that I've always been an independent little man. Well, my upbringing made me independent. And actually, I needed that because I left home at 17. And if I hadn't have had that independence, I probably would have made a real mess of leaving home at 17.
Before we go to your personal past, which we said we will a little bit talk about, but I would like to know, so you're working as part of your work, part of your service is to look at a person present, but you also look at the person past, maybe future, but you also look a metaverse where you see this conflicting from past lives coming into all of this accumulating to this very specific moment. He's sitting right in front of you, and you try to figure out where are the conflicts. Is that basically how I could explain what you do?
Yeah, so there's different layers to it, and it might be all of them together causing the problem, or it might just be one thing that's causing the problem. So let's say, for instance, somebody comes to me and they just can't seem to find the right person to date. Maybe they just keep dating narcissists. And it may well be that one of their missions or their soul in this life is to learn to value themselves and their self worth, and these narcissists are the mechanism to make them go, do you know what? I'm better than this. I'm not doing this. Okay.
Right.
So everybody has a role to play. And even the most awful people that you can think of, they have chosen how they're going to achieve their mission. And, sometimes it's not in a nice way, but that's their choice. They didn't have to do it.
What I'm wondering, would you tell this to a person? Would you, part of your reading, tell them, listen, I can see a conflict in some past life, and that might create your, self-love problematics. So would you tell this to the people, or would you rather be more mysterious in your diagnosis?
No, I will tell them. I will be completely honest. And we reincarnate with the same people time and time again, but in different roles. So we've both been male and female. We've been parent. We've been child. We've been lover. There's just all sorts of different roles. And so I'm trying to think of someone that I've worked with. Like maybe if someone's got a love hate relationship in this life where they can't be with someone and they can't be without them. The only one that springs to mind is Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor, but the youngsters won't know who they are. But they may have had a past life where they were in a vow together. And, like, for instance, back in the day, we took our marriage vows much, much more seriously than a lot of people do these days. So if those two souls came together again in this life, that vow could have been a hangover. And when they died, their soul didn't relinquish that vow. Okay. And we see that a lot with people who were in the feudal system and people who took vows like nuns and monks, because again, back in those days, they were really powerful vows. And for nuns and monks, it would have been faith, hope, and chastity. And poverty. And a lot of people who've had many souls in religious institutions, they have issues with their sexuality these days, either one extreme or the other. And the same with money, because their soul still has that vow going on. And so it can make it very hard for them to be successful financially in this life until we get rid of that vow. Once we clear that vow for once and for all, then they can have a different reality because they're not distracted. That's not the right word. They're not being held back by that outdated vow.
Oh, it's amazing that you work in this realm so that you are consciously aware of these connections. So you would really feel and understand that he's been a priest or a monk at some previous life. And it would be a fun session to have with you if you would tell me that I've been like a monk in my previous life. And that's why my student here is where they were. I, oh, at least I slept better.
That's true.
No,
And
wonderful. Now, this is very interesting because for a lot of people who just live like in the here and now, and Netflix is as far as they go. It's interesting to talk to someone or listen to someone who sees so many different um, layers of reality surrounding us and the interconnection that we have with our past and future and present and the people around, and all of it mixes and all of it exchanges. That's why we invented the word holistic, I guess, to express that we are so much more intertwined, and that you are basically are a doctor of these intertwinings and see what needs to be sorting out. So that was a very good start. Now, we said we would like also to talk about the gift, right? Having this gift, having been able to see all of these things. Can you a little bit talk about the gift and how it manifests, how it came about, and it's a little bit to understand people what is the gift and how they're supposed to understand it.
first and foremost, I would say it's not a gift. Everybody has an intuitive spiritual, much the same way that some people want to be doctors and some people want to be podcast hosts. Not everybody wants to do readings. Now, that's fine, but by just understanding our spiritual nature, we find out so much more depth to what goes on in our lives now. So, by understanding how intuition comes to you, do you hear it? Do you see it? Do you feel it? Do you just kind of know it, but you don't understand why? Those are things that we can be taught. And those are things that once we understand them, will have a very different reality. And there are people in the world, brilliant business people. I would say that they're intuitive and they just use it for their business. Okay. Everybody, I believe, should tap into their spiritual essence and understand it more, because there are laws that govern how our soul behaves on this planet. So
Yes.
reincarnation and law of attraction, things like that, whether we believe in them or not, they're still there. Okay. And so they will influence the life that we have here. So we may as well tap into them, harness them, use them, and get the best results, you know?
Can I break you for one very second? Because I've been thinking a lot about this question. Do you think if more of us would tap into this rule book, how it functions, do you think it would create a better world, a different world? Would we create different societies, or it would look very much alike, just maybe a bit more this, a bit more? Could you, if you just for a second, give me
Yeah.
like a science fiction book? How would a society look where a majority of the people is tuned in? Could you
Okay.
for fun?
So I would say that it's exactly how Atlantis was back in the day, and Atlantis is this mythical island that disappeared many, many years ago, but it's not mythical, it's real, it's just no one's actually found it yet. So imagine a world where everybody is tuned in to everyone else. Like you can feel the mood, you can tell if someone's lying, you can tell if someone's got bad intent. Everybody works as a whole rather than individuals. And just by having a deeper understanding of yourself and the world, you treat people differently. You know, I tend to put myself in other people's shoes. Okay. Why is the person in front of me driving at 2 miles an hour? I can go into a road rage mood, or I can go, well, you know what? Maybe they're driving a new car and the sun's really low and they're just a bit nervous and just like back off and give them some space. You know, it just makes us more compassionate. When we understand our spiritual nature, we would treat it differently when it comes to medicine, when it comes to health as a whole. It would just be, it wouldn't be a utopia. Don't get me wrong. It's not going to suddenly be perfect, but it, people would just have a deeper understanding of themselves and each other, and they would interact differently. Whereas I think society's gotten very insular because so many people work from home these days, so many people just sit on their phones and their computers. Everyone's isolating, or not everyone, but the majority are isolating away from each other. And we're going the opposite way to where we need to go.
That's very interesting because we have a lot of utopian concepts developed, anarchists, whatnot, communists, whatnot,
Mm.
and they all spin around money in one way or the other, or it's a simplification or a property or you know. But it's so funny because I'm not really much aware of really strong developed utopian concept, which is based around the fact of tuning in each other and feeling each other and not mentioning money or property. Just keep on focusing on the fact that if we see each other truly and tune in each other, that a society based on that, I'm not aware of any utopian concept. And that's
Yeah.
interesting because you don't mention money, you don't mention any of it. You just mention, you know, feeling the people around you truly and seeing them. That's that's an interesting one, right?
Well, I think back in the day, you go back to Stone Age, man, we were more of a collective. And my understanding of Neanderthal man was that they could actually all get into the collective unconscious of their race and see the history of their race. Whereas we don't have that really anymore. And yes, we need money to pay bills and to buy food and everything else. But we've made money the center of our world to a large extent when actually the spirituality, I don't mean religion, our spirituality should be at the center. And I think they went awry, but back in the 60s, when we had all these communes, they had the right idea. Let's come together and work as a team. Let's pool our resources. And that was exactly how we were back in Stone Age. And it kind of evolved because you had the person who did the flint knapping, you had the person that did the skins to make the furs to wear. And then it became a step further, and all these people are now being paid to do it. Whereas back in the day, you bartered with beads or furs or jewelry. And so it's sort of moved on, but then it's gone too far the other way.
These communes in the 60s were unfortunately mainly not as successful as we wished it to be.
No, but the idea was good.
Great idea. Would love to be there for a week. But that's but that definitely didn't work out so well. But
No, it
anyway,
didn't.
training. We didn't have enough training. I mean, you can't expect to erase the last 2,500 years worshipping money and just expect the people to just wake up one morning and it's all, you know, wake up as new beings. It would take time, most probably 1,000 years or so to
Mm.
get things back into back into the race. So sorry, I brought you up about talking about getting the gift, or I think you had this gift as a child, or yes and no, and thing developed. Because I always like to talk in my podcast about the gift when I have somebody like you on my podcast, because I know there are a lot of people out there who might have it or might think they had it as a kid, then they lost it, or people have those flashes, they're scared of it, they don't know what to do with them. This is like a reoccurring theme on this podcast. I know right now there are people watching, always like to have readers like you tell their story about how they became the gift, how they grown with the gift, and tell people, hopefully, don't be scared, or maybe be scared. I don't know. It's your
Okay, so as I believe everyone can do it, my family weren't into this. So when I was a small child, like under the age of 5, and I had quite a few strange things happen, and it scared me because I didn't understand it. So I kind of blocked it out. And then I spent the rest of my life going into all sorts of things that were spiritual and psychic and paranormal, whether that was UFOs, spontaneous combustion, witches, reincarnation, you name it. And then in my 20s, I just wanted to be psychic. I have no idea what I thought I was going to do with it. And I worked with someone who told me that I was psychic and that I just needed to go and develop it. I was like, okay, great. Now what? So, what I would say is that if we were all brought up to be intuitive rather than to be logical, I feel that the world would be a better place. Actually, we can do with being balanced, because if you balance out the left side of the brain and the right side of the brain, you fuse the bridge in the middle, which I can't remember what it's called. I think it begins with an H. And actually, it means that you are totally accessing both halves all the time. Whereas most people are left brain, which is logical, and that's how society functions. There is a space for the right brain, which is the creativity, but we don't necessarily value writers and artists and that side of society as much. So what I would say is, if people want to understand any of the experiences they've had, whether they thought they've been scary or whether they don't just really know what's happening to them, if they find a good psychic development circle and work with someone that knows what they're doing, they'll get to understand how they're specifically wired, because we all get our information in a different way. So I see a lot, but I see it in my third eye. I don't see it like I'm seeing you. I see it in my head. So if I said to you, think of your mother, you would probably be able to see her in your mind's eye, wouldn't you? And then for me, when I hear, I don't hear externally like you and I are talking now. It's more like a stream of consciousness. And I know it's not Tracy going, oh, what shall I have for dinner today? But it does sound very much like my inner voice. But it's all that information that I need to give to somebody when I'm doing a reading. Okay. So I didn't know that that's how my information came to me. Once I understood that, it was like this massive light bulb moment. And that's what I see with my students when they come to me to learn, when they go, oh my God, I'm clairvoyant, or I'm clairaudient, or I'm this and that. And they suddenly make sense of themselves. Then the information gets stronger, and then you can understand it and work with it in a more effective way. Whether that's just to help you live your life in a more aligned way, or whether you want to use it in your yoga, in your therapy work, in readings. There's a million and one different ways you can work with it once you understand it.
very interesting because you sound like a medicine man. I once had a wonderful workshop with a person in Africa. He was a dancer. And he talked about that as part of the initiation in their community, that basically the medicine man is helping to find each and every of those men of the tribe to understand what is their trigger into
Mm,
this supernatural. And some go maybe through music, and that's what brings them into this connection with their ancestors. And some need to smell goat milk. I
yeah.
thought so interesting. And then he gave a couple of examples. how people very individually have a trigger, how they can connect with this higher spirit. So it's so
Mm.
interesting that you are a modern day medicine man, being able through your knowledge to understand in the individual person's trigger to enhance their channel.
Mm.
This, I think, is fascinating to a lot of people who should have made a podcast only on that subject. Maybe that would have been a winner, because it is interesting how you see them initiative, or you have a feeling for people's triggers, or how specific can you get with those triggers? Because smelling goat milk, that stick to me my whole life. How all the possibilities that as a medicine man you see a person say, here's a glass of goat milk, and you're like, see the end. It's fascinating, isn't it?
And I tend to create the triggers. So the breath work is really important. If you think of it as a lift or an elevator, depending on what you guys call it, the breath work will take you up through the vibrations to get your brain into the right place to work. And although I'm saying up, actually, in all meditations, we tend to find that the energy goes up, but we go down. Okay. And
Yes.
the breath slows and it becomes deeper, but still comfortable. And the breath directly affects the brain waves. And psychic work, meditation, and REM are like fag papers apart on the spectrum. And you need to get into that really receptive mood or brainwave, and then life gets easier. And once you've learned to do that, I think most people can do it really. Whereas initially, it can take quite a while to be able to connect. But I could literally come off this podcast now, turn around to a client and start reading for them. Whereas when I first started out, I would have needed time and space. It would have been like, right, I just need to forget about that podcast. I just need to breathe for a few minutes and then I'll be ready. So it was more of a transition. So it's much, much quicker. But the key is confidence. And I really struggled with that because I didn't believe in myself anyway when I was a kid. So, I was really up against it. But confidence only comes from practicing it and learning to trust the information that comes to you and then being able to apply it.
Right. I need to ask you a technical question at this point. So, did I understood you correct? You think being psychic needs a certain alliance between left and right brain. You need to sort of say harmonize the energies so to open up the psychic channel. Did I understood this correctly, or this misunderstanding?
No, I think I didn't explain it very well. So when we bring the left and right sides of the brain into balance, it fuses that bridge in the middle and it makes it easier to work as both, because there is a time when we have to be logical, but there's also times when we have to be intuitive, and they don't necessarily sit together. Okay. By working on both sides and balancing them, you'll find life is easier. I used to be a financial advisor, so I spent most of my time in my left brain being very logical, and that made it really hard to do the intuitive work. Then I went the other way and started spending all my time virtually in my intuitive brain. And I can flick backwards and forwards very, very easily now. But initially, that's really tricky for a lot of people to do. They can be one or the other, but they struggle to use both hemispheres. And so it will benefit people if they learn to use both sides. And Dr. Joe Dispenza is brilliant for that. Um, but really, just being able to switch into your spiritual and intuitive side, that is the gift. That's the bit that makes all the difference. Because if your boss asks you to make a decision, you might be totally logical about it, but you don't listen to your intuition, and then you'll wish you had.
Right.
Okay.
This is very interesting because I teach meditation for a really long time, and I think I mentioned it to you. And it's all about harmonizing both brain sides, right?
Yeah.
I've come to understand that between psychic work and meditation work, they're for a very long part of the journey, almost in alliance. If it's a braving, if it's the energies, if all of that stuff that you're telling, But then there's a very distinctive kind of like split where we try to more basically harmonize, and there are no visions, there's none of this, because we try to be absolutely here now and basically live in a certain way to be just right, while you then turn into all of this, get open your mind and open your feeling to turn into all of these different frequencies, and start to get information from these frequencies, walking the same road, and then you turn this way, and I'll turn that way. So this is something I've very fun, very interesting, that I've learned over the last couple of months,
I
if
think
that's true.
I think it's like words or maths, with maths, you can go and be an engineer. You could be a mathematician. You could be a scientist. There's lots you can do with maths. And it's the same with being intuitive. I can go and be someone that helps with medicinal stuff, be a policeman. And I believe that the police are very intuitive. You can't take that to court with you. But if you intuitively believe it's this person over here that murdered this person over here, you can direct your attention to finding the evidence. And I do mean finding, not manufacturing. If you're a counselor, if you're working with somebody as a counselor, you're going to intuitively know that there's something important that happened to this person that they haven't told you about. And you might know that they were abused, but they haven't said that. And you can engineer the questioning to get them to say to you, oh, yeah, I was abused. And then you can work with that knowledge. Now, they might have just thought it wasn't important. It's like, oh, yeah, well, I was abused when I was 10, but I'm like totally over that now. So I don't need to talk about it. Because I get people come to me for Reiki and I ask them about health issues and they'll say, oh, I have this, this, and this. And then at the end, I can say to them, well, I was picking up this, this, and this. And they go, oh, yeah, I had a car accident, but that was 20 years ago. It's like, yeah, well, it's still causing you problems. So people delete what they don't think is important, but they don't realize it may be super important to the counselor. And once that counselor can push the buttons and get them to go, yeah, I was abused, they can dig into that and find all of the other things that are buried there, like self-worth, shame, guilt, whatever. So this is what I'm saying about not everyone's meant to do psychic readings, but you can use that intuition to really apply it to whatever you do for work. Even scientists, they make leaps of faith because intuitively they feel they've got to go in that direction and then they get the result. So it's really about developing it so you can trust it and work with it. And then you'll just listen to it. You won't question it.
Uh, we unfortunately coming to the end to this podcast, because I could talk for hours with you. There's so much there. First of all, it's just anybody who wants to learn more about their gift, wants to develop their gift. I think you're giving lectures or courses, you work with people to individually or groups, I don't know, but I think we will put all the links, information, websites, how to contact you. So if you want to develop your gift, is it personal use, professional use, whatever, it's an interesting thing to learn anyway
Yeah,
for everyone. And of
absolutely.
course, you do readings and works like that. I think we got some understanding of what you do. And again, I was so happy talking to someone who's really made it their life, their profession, 15 years. That's what you do. And I think this is a strong message just on its own, to have spent some time, and we all understand you went so many different ways and you learned so much, and it all brought you to where you are right now. So
Yeah.
thank you so much from my personal point. And if you want to say some final words, you're more than welcome to say goodbye to the audience.
Okay. So I would say, even if you don't even think you are psychic, because I do group training and I do one-to-one training, quite a lot of the people that come, they arrive kind of going, I can do this, but they leave being able to do it. And just if you're curious, even if you just are thinking, I don't think I'm psychic or intuitive, but I'm curious, just go with what you're drawn to and see what you like and what you don't like. You're not going to like everything. Okay. I love crystals, but I'm not particularly into them. I use pendulums, but it's not my main tool. Okay. So you're not going to like everything, but if you dabble in a little bit of everything, you'll find out where you do want to be. And then those are the things that you'll be here to pursue in this life. So just let your curiosity lead you.
Thank you so very much. I hope I'll see you again. Thank you.
Hopefully, see you soon.